Alright, so it's been a while. I've been on vacation, went to Bonnaroo, so I haven't watched many movies and haven't done any reviews for quite a while. I actually watched this movie multiple weeks ago. I just never got around to filming, recording my review. So, this is Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer from 1986. It's directed by John McNaughton. This is his first movie, first big feature film, and he didn't really do too much else afterwards. He directed Mad Dog and Glory, and then Wild Things, which is actually a really good movie, but not much else other than those. This is a big star maker for Michael Rooker. He did this and then went on to do tons of stuff. Recognizable most recently for playing Merle in The Walking Dead, and he was in Days of Thunder with Tom Cruise, The Sixth Day with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Cliffhanger with Stallone. So he's been in a lot of stuff. He's very recognizable. And this is, considering this is his first movie, John McNaughton's first movie, it's easy to guess that this is a very independent, low-budget film from the 80s, a horror film. That's a very common thing to do, is to make your first film as a horror film, because they're easy to make on a low budget. A lot of directors do that. The one that just pops in my head right away is Sam Raimi with Evil Dead, and of course there's John Carpenter and Wes Craven. A lot of people do it. But anyways, so this is actually loosely based on an actual serial killer. Henry Lucas, I think was his name, something like that. But one of the main reasons you may know about this, and I know about it, is because it pops up on a lot of lists of most disturbing movies, the most disturbing movies ever created. This is always usually up at the top, along with things like Cannibal Holocaust or Salò and the 100 Days of Sodom or whatever, things like that. So this is always up there on that list, and so of course it piques your interest, and I've always been intrigued to see it, to see if how disturbing it actually is. I'll come back to that at the end here. But the story follows, actually, the first person we meet is a woman named Becky, and she's moving back home with her brother, Otis. She's just left her husband, and he's been having a lot of problems. I think her husband went to jail or something like that. Again, my recollection's a little fuzzy. But she's moving back in with her brother, her older brother Otis, and he has a roommate named Henry. And Otis and Henry are both former criminals. That's where they met, in jail. And so now they're on probation, but they're living together, just doing whatever they need to for work. Otis sells some pot, some weed every now and then to some high schoolers and stuff like that. Henry, I think he works at a garage or something. So we meet all of them, and Becky kind of starts getting an interest in Henry, especially after, I don't know if I mentioned, Henry's played by Michael Rooker, of course. But Becky gets kind of an interest in him after Otis tells her that he was in jail for murder and actually killed his mom and stuff like that. Kind of piques her interest, and she's kind of attracted to that really kind of disturbing bad boy image. And they actually kind of start to bond quite a bit, and that kind of comes into play later. And then Otis kind of has his pretty pervy side, some incestuous tones every once in a while. He's kind of trying to do kind of creepy things with Becky, so that kind of comes into play too once Henry and Becky kind of get together, and then Otis comes into play. But anyways, I don't really want to get into that too much. But so these three are just kind of hanging out, and one night Otis and Henry are going to go out and have a beer, and then we see them, and they're in Otis's car, a giant old 70s Impala or something, and they're with a couple hookers, a couple prostitutes, and Henry's in the back, and he ends up killing the girl that he's with, and then the girl that's with Otis in the front starts freaking out, of course, and she's trying to leave, and they kill her too. And that sets up kind of the whole sequence of the rest of the movie. So Otis is kind of pretty disturbed for a while that they just did that, and Henry just kind of quickly gets rid of the bodies and stuff. But then Otis kind of comes around and kind of feels like he liked what he did, and so the two of them go on a bit of a killing spree. They kill a motorist while they set up their car to look like they're off to the side of the road with car troubles, and they kill the person that comes to help them. And then one of the most disturbing parts of the whole movie, which I agree is extremely disturbing, is when they go, eventually they get like a video camera, and they go into a house, and they have this whole home invasion scene, but it's all shot with their video camera that they have. So it's super realistic, and that part is extremely disturbing. Like, that's easily the most disturbing part of the whole movie. It had a very Clockwork Orange kind of feel to it, if you're familiar with that at all, when Alex and his droogs and Clockwork Orange do the home invasion. That is like the, focal point of that movie, or a big turning point. Kind of similar. Obviously, in this movie, Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, it's much more realistic, but made me think of that. Also, I kind of failed to mention at the beginning, the movie opens up with a sequence of about 3 or 4 corpses all over in various contortions, or however they were killed, and that's pretty disturbing too. It just shows them right away, and it just shows the bodies, and some of them are pretty graphic. It doesn't show like what happened to them or actually them being killed. It's just their dead bodies there, and that kind of is the introduction to the whole movie. But so yeah, Otis and Henry go on this killing spree together, and then eventually, once Becky and Henry kind of get a little bit closer, something happens with Otis. I had mentioned he's kind of awkward and weird towards Becky, his sister, and that kind of sets off a whole big climax or a confrontation between all of them. But I don't really want to ruin that. Anyways, so it's listed as, one of those most disturbing movies. I agree, it has multiple disturbing scenes in it. It's not as graphic and as violent as what you'll see now, but definitely I could see in '86, this being extremely pretty disturbing. And I think one of the big bases that it was sold on is the fact that you have horror movies coming out before this and similar times, like The Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween. You have a lot of horror movies, but a lot of those are based around, these killers that are supernatural, which I think of as more in the horror genre. And this is something different because it's a real person, and it's actually based, loosely on an actual real person. So this is just a guy that's going around killing people, 2 guys. And so that's kind of, I think, where the most disturbing aspects come from, is that they're just people. They're not, they're criminals, of course, but they're not anything like they're not a werewolf, they're not a vampire or something like that. They're just a person killing people. So I think that's one of the reasons it gets some of the more disturbing aspects of it. This and 2 other movies, Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down by Pedro Almodovar, and the other one, The Cook, the Thief, and His Wife. These are the 3 main movies that actually were the creation of the NC-17 rating. So it used to be just X. Things like this were rated X, like A Clockwork Orange was rated X, and so was Midnight Cowboy. But then they made the distinction between X-rated movies, which eventually became pornography, and movies like this that became NC-17, which means, you had to be older than 17, and they're pretty graphic, but they're not strictly pornographic. So this was one of the movies that actually was the cause of that label. So that's a little bit of information. So yeah, I think it's a really good, very, very good indie horror type movie. It's more of like a torture movie, crime, murder rampage type movie. It's really good. It's super low budget and everything like that. It's done well. It has that very 80s feel to it. Um, the camera work and the film grittiness a little bit. So it's good. Definitely one to check out if you're a horror fan, or your interest is piqued by those most disturbing lists, movies on those. Some of the movie connections I already mentioned, Clockwork Orange. There's a scene that's very similar to that. Another one that a lot of people make reference to is Man Bites Dog, which is a French film. I've actually seen it, and I'll have a link to it. So I have a review of that, which I didn't like that one. That movie follows like a serial killer. It's all in black and white, and it's like a camera crew, so kind of like a documentary camera crew, are following the serial killer, and eventually the camera crew gets involved too, starts helping him with his crimes. And then that's a decent movie. That's another one that's usually on that list of disturbing movies. That movie's okay. It's kind of lost me a ways in. I got kind of bored with that one. So this one's a lot better, I think. And then the third movie I think is the most similar is Maniac, the original one. There's a remake right now with Elijah Wood, but the original Maniac from I don't have it up, but late 70s or early 80s. I think maybe 80s, is really good. That movie's really good. I was kind of surprised. And this is very similar because you're focused on this one person pretty much that just has a compulsion to kill. Very similar, both very good, but they're distinct too because Maniac gets into the psychological problems that the main guy has. Really what's going on in his head. He's very paranoid and has delusions, and it gets into that really well in Maniac. On the contrary, though, in this movie, Henry, he's just kills people. They don't really get into his state of mind of why he does it. He talks about his past a little bit, but even with that, he kind of comes off as a bit of a liar because he's changed up the story a little bit. So he just seems like a guy that kills people. You don't get into the psychosis of it, or if he just likes to do it. So they're different on that aspect. And yeah, so I'm giving it I give it a 3.75 out of 5. It's a very good movie. It's on Netflix right now. That's where I watched it. So if you want to check out a cult classic, I would definitely watch this. So that'll be it. All right.